The Avatar, master of all four elements, destined to bring balance to the world, versus the Akatsuki, a group of very powerful rogue shinobi on a mission to capture all of the tailed beasts. These are two very different yet similar universes, and I thought it would be very interesting to see if the Avatar, in this instance, Aang, would be able to combat and best the Akatsuki. For this scenario, we'll be using Aang at the end of the series after he fought Ozai, and for the Akatsuki, we'll just be using the main roster they had from the beginning of Shippuden to the Pain arc. So Sasuke, Jugo, Karin, and Orochimaru won't be factored into this. Another thing I think is important to note is that for this video, Aang will be working his way through the different Akatsuki duels, so he won't be getting jumped. Before we discuss how these encounters will go, I think it's very important to establish how powerful Aang is. In just his base, he was able to create a giant sand mushroom cloud with just his airbending. When factoring the size, the density, and the volume of the cloud, his feat capped at 6.3 kilotons of TNT, giving Aang in just his base town levels of attack potency. But this isn't even factoring him in the Avatar state, because he's an entirely different beast. To really capture the power of the Avatar state, we have to look at the feats of the other Avatars prior to Aang. And with Aang being a full-fledged Avatar and a stated master of all four elements, he too should somewhat scale to these feats. While Roku was explaining the true nature of the Avatar state, we see some very impressive showings from the past Avatars, most notably being Avatar Sito, who was able to trigger the eruption of multiple volcanoes at once. The energy required to perform a feat of this magnitude was calculated at around 40 megatons of TNT, which is thousands of times stronger than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima and even approaching the likes of the SAR bomb, meaning that Aang in his Avatar state could scale to city level to potentially even mountain level of attack potency. This is also consistent with the other avatars such as Kyoshi being able to separate an entire island, which is calculated at 3.1 teratons of TNT, and being stated to be able to throw around large land masses, which could be as big as continents. So to sum it all up, the peak power that Aang can produce with his bending in the Avatar state is around city level if we're lowballing him, to potentially even continental levels of power at a high end. When looking at his speed, he's very quick, being fast enough to react to and even redirect lightning, which will pretty much give him massively hypersonic combat and reaction speeds. So what does this mean in the fight versus the Akatsuki? When starting off at the bottom with Hidan and Kakuzu, Aang is put in a situation where he has to fight an immortal shinobi in Hidan. He also has to fight Kakuzu, who has this mask that can fire out 4 of the major elements, such as wind, fire, water, and lightning. And I can't forget to mention the fact that he has multiple hearts. But when you really look at it, he's just firing out elements which Aang is no stranger to facing. If Aang were just limited to his base, I would actually have him losing this matchup. Kakuzu and Hidan somewhat scale to the Asuma and the Kakashis of the world when it comes to their combat speed, so they would be able to keep up with Aang, and I honestly see base Aang having problems harming the likes of Kakuzu. But in his Avatar state, it's a completely different story, with him now being astronomically stronger. He would easily be able to handle Hidan, probably resorting to confining him in Earth, pretty much making him a non-factor. Even with his reluctance to kill, his bending is just on another tier compared to Kakuzu, and he probably just render him unconscious with a powerful attack with his bending, or if he somehow catches on the Kakuzu having multiple hearts, he could use the knowledge of Kyoshi's water bending technique and freeze Kakuzu's hearts, leaving him at 1 before just knocking him out cold. Or he could potentially even be able to energy bend the energy within Kakuzu, which would have him at his mercy. Without experience of the past avatars and with him potentially having access to all other bending techniques, I don't really see Aang losing here. Moving on to Sasori and Deidara, this is where things kinda get interesting. As we all know, Deidara's clay is made out of earth and uses his hands to infuse the clay with his chakras so it can explode. Aang in his Avatar state would probably know that he could earthbend the clay and he could potentially redirect Deidara's attacks. Aang also has his seismic sense, so Deidara's landmines are completely out of the question, and so is his air advantage that Aang can also fly. A potential win condition for this group is if Deidara were to use his C4, which is literally microscopic clay that detonates after it's been inhaled by its target, completely destroying their body from the inside out. But I feel like it's important to note that it's been shown in the Avatar series that the seismic sense isn't just limited to Earth and the ground, it's also been shown to be able to counter Earth in the air, and clay just so happens to be made out of Earth. I don't think Aang being able to do this in his Avatar state, where his stats are heightened to unimaginable levels, is far from the realm of possibility. But even if you don't buy that, whenever Aang's in his Avatar state, he surrounds himself with the spear of all 4 of the elements, giving him a perfect defense and offense, so C4 probably wouldn't even be able to reach him. Deidara does have a win condition with C0, which is Deidara's ultimate art form where he blows himself up. If he were to hit Aang with it, it would probably be over, but I find it very likely that he would probably be overwhelmed way before he can even pull that off. Sasori's poison would be a problem against anyone else but Aang, who can navigate throughout the air and attack from afar. And Aang would easily be able to dispatch Sasori's puppets, and I really don't see his Iron Sand posing too much of a problem for Aang in his Avatar state. Now at this point, this is where Aang is treading very dangerous waters, with his next two opponents being Itachi and Kisame, who both blatantly scale over Sage Jiraiya, who has mountain level statements, meaning that this can go either two ways depending on how powerful you think Aang is. If you go off the scaling established earlier in this video and say Aang is mountain to island level, Aang finds himself in a situation where he's fighting two opponents who are every bit as powerful as he is, possibly even more powerful due to the hacks and abilities they have, with Itachi having techniques such as his water bullet jutsu, which is stated to move at the speed of light, which is just faster than anything Aang could reasonably react to. I'd even mention Itachi's Amaterasu, which is as hot as the surface of the sun. His Susanoo was able to tank attacks from Orochimaru's 8-headed Hydra, and even brush off attacks as powerful as Kirin, which is an island level attack, his Tosca Blade, which is literally a one-shot, his Yada Mirror, which reflects elements, and arguably his most devastating ability, Tsukiyomi, which allows Itachi to trap you under an illusion that he controls, putting you at his mercy. In one instance, he was even able to make a shinobi of Kakashi's caliber endure his torture for 3 days in a near instant. But this may or may not work depending on how you think these power systems interact. It would be very clear that Aang would already have his hands full with Itachi, but to add Kisame to the situation pretty much makes this an overkill, making this an inevitable loss for the Avatar. But let's get bananas and let's highball Aang to the extreme based off of statements and the showings of all the Avatars, and to see if he can beat all of the Akatsuki at once. So if you take Kyoshi's statement at face value and scale Aang to that, by definition a landmass is defined to be a continent, thus giving Aang multi-continental levels of attack potency. So against the entirety of the Akatsuki, the lower level members such as Hidan, Kakuzu, Sasori, and Konan and Deidara are non-factors in this fight and would easily get brushed off. Now it would just be Aang versus the heavy hitters of the Akatsuki, that being Kisame, Itachi, Pain, and Obito, who all have island level scaling and sub-relativistic to even higher speed scalings. So this is literally a situation where if Aang hits any of them with one of his stronger attacks, he could deal devastating damage and beat any one of them, but it would be very difficult for him to do that, even with his power advantage. The speed gap between him and say an Itachi, or god forbid an Obito, is pretty large. When looking at Pain, he has a plethora of Rinnegan abilities and his paths of Pain, that being the Diva path, which is the strongest and can use the almighty push and pull abilities, his Ashura path that can manipulate its body and fire projectiles, his human path that can pull out souls, his animal path that allows him to use his summonings, his Preda path that can absorb chakra, and his Naraka path that can repair their bodies. As powerful as Pain is, he's not even as powerful as Obito, who was stated by Minato to be on another level of power, and this Obito is astronomically stronger than the version that fought Minato. Mastering his Kamui ability, which allows him to teleport people, things, and even parts of his body into another dimension before things touch him, granting him intangibility. His combat speeds are at the bare minimum, relativistic to possibly even faster than light. All it would take is for Aang to get hit with an attack while being off guard, and the fight would be over. As powerful as Aang is, he isn't invulnerable, and he's very susceptible to taking damage even while being in his avatar state if he's caught off guard. Unless they're just standing still, it would be very difficult for Aang to hit any of the higher tier Akatsuki members, and the only way I can see Aang winning this battle is if he's completely bloodlusted and resort to just throwing continents at the Akatsuki. But even then, Obito would probably just go into his Kamui dimension before being hit, and this is so out of character for Aang, making the victor of this battle the Akatsuki. Thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure to drop a like and subscribe if you liked this video. This is Destro, and I'm out.